This video shows how you can define a composition of plugins in your workspace with Mesh. First of all, you need to define a new Mesh project from the Eclipse menu. After deciding the name of your Mesh project, you can press Finish and a new Mesh project is generated in your workspace. Now you can switch to the JOpera design view, and you can open the project that has just been created. You need to click on the project OML file. By clicking on the process that has the same name of the mesh project you just created, you can add the activities that you want to perform in your workflow. For example, in this case, we are adding a new activity by pushing the add button. And in this case, it is the activity that executes the passing test case. We select the mesh task to execute by browsing the list of the mesh task. This list is automatically populated by mesh at the startup of the Eclipse plugin with the names of the task exported by the task-based plugin installed on your system. This video shows the insertion of all the tasks required to define a workflow that help a user to find the bug in his software by executing the passing and failing test of its application. An Eclipse workspace with all the files used in this demo is available on the Mesh website. After having defined some task to execute, we are switching to the data flow view of the JOpera editor in order to connect the task inputs and outputs in order to make the workflow work. We show all the input and output parameters of the execute passing test task. This first parameter is indicates the way Eclipse should run the run configuration that we are going to execute with the mesh run configuration launcher task. In this case, we generated a new constant that we called mode and assigned to hit the value coverage. We are now defining a new constant that is the ones that indicate the name of the test to execute, which is the passing test, whose name is middle finder test. Now we are going to define the input parameters of the execute failing test. The execution mode of failing test is the same as passing test. Thus, we connect the mode parameter of the execute failing test with the coverage constant that we created before. Now we need to define a new constant that indicates the name of the run to configuration to execute. In this case, the bug test run configuration. We generated the new constant. The default name is a duplicate of the constant we created before, thus we change name We now define the input and output parameter of the export passing and export failing coverage. The export passing coverage has some properties to set, in this case the output format, which is a property files for us. And we can also share the configuration of the export passing coverage task with the export failing coverage, because basically we want to save the coverage information in the same file format for both the task. Now we switch to the Java view because we want to show you how you can define a workspace task. The task in this case is used to filter out from the coverage information the lines that belong to the test class itself and not to the program, because these lines of course are not useful to find the bug. We thus create a new class in the standard Eclipse way. To define a mesh task directly in the workspace, you just need to write a class that extends the abstract class mesh local task. Then you need to implement the run method. The implementation is available in the workspace we provide in the mesh website. Next, we need to indicate a mesh that the class that we just created is a task that we want to execute, so we add this as a program in the editor, and we call this program with the same name of the class with the dot replaced by the underscore. Then we need to add the mesh task subsystem adapter to this program. Then we add the task inputs with the same name that we used in the source code, and also the task outputs. Then we can add the two instances of the local task that we just created, and we call them filter passing and filter failing, because we use them to filter the coverage of the passing test and of the failing test. We can find this task in the list that is opened by JOpera editor. We can then switch to the data flow view and add the two tasks that we just inserted into the workflow, and then we can edit the connections for their inputs and outputs. In this case, we just need to connect the outputs of the Eclemma export passing and failing coverage with the inputs of the filter passing and filter failing tasks. Then we can add the last task instance, that is the task that calculates the diff among the failing and passing coverage. After switching to the data flow view, we can define the inputs for this last task. This task has a configuration editor associated to it, and we can open it to set what is the criterion that we can use to calculate the spectra diff. We are now switching to the control flow view to define the control flow of the task. The JOpera editor usually automatically identifies what is the correct control flow, but in this case we have some tasks that are not connected by data flow connections, and thus the order of execution of the task is not correct. So we want to change the order of execution just to have first the very test case executed and their coverage exported, and then the failing test cases executed and their coverage exported. We can now execute the workflow using the button in the JOpera editor. While the workflow is executed, we can see that the views of Eclipse change their content. We just saw the passing test cases executed and the failing test cases executed. Now we see that all the tasks have been executed. If we open the Measure on Time folder, we can see the task folders associated to each task. The name of the task folder is the same as the task instance name. The last task generates an object as its output, and we can open it with the task output editor. We can see that the lines indicated on the top of the output editors are debuggy lines. In fact, line 11 is the one with the bug. The data flow view permits us also to open other results. For example, the results of tasks that generate a file as their result. If we right-click on the output of one of these tasks and we click on the Open Editor button, the proper Eclipse editor for the file type will be opened. In this case, we opened the file with the information about the lines covered during the passing test cases execution. And we can also open the file with the line coverage of the failing test cases.